This is Duke University.
Dr. Goldman is a professor in the Department of Religion here at Duke University, and we have a number of colleagues from the Divinity School who are going to be supporting the performance this evening, along with folk singer Lisa Deaton, who was also with us last year for the Johnny Cash. So I want you to enjoy the evening. We're going to, in a moment, have another word of introduction, but I thought I would start the evening off by reading you a quotation from folk singer Eliza Gilkyson, writing about Bob Dylan. This is on an album called A Nod to Bob, which is a tribute album by a bunch of different performers. But here's what Eliza Gilkyson writes about Bob Dylan. He rocked, he spewed venom, he seduced. He sang us to sleep and slapped us awake. He befriended the shadow, and he held the lamp up to all our faces. He irreverently and irrevocably turned the suburban backyard of folk music into a mysterious, tangled forest of unlimited possibilities. I'm still uncovering alleyways in my own music that lead directly to his door. I don't know if anyone who comes after him can claim originality. Damn it. I give up. I sit at his feet. Thus, Eliza Gilkyson. We're now going to have a word from Lori Patton, who is the Dean of Trinity College of Arts and Sciences. Lori had intended to be here tonight also to share in offering a word of welcome. Unfortunately, her plane was canceled or postponed in Newark Airport, and so she's frustratingly not able to be here, but she has sent us a word to the community. And so we've gotten this email, and my colleague, Dr. Anathea Portier-Young, is now going to read you Lori Patton's greeting. So I'll turn it over to you, and enjoy the concert.
So I am the messenger. Everything you hear after this sentence will be a quotation. Friends, I'm so sorry I cannot join Dean Richard Hayes in welcoming you to this event. We deans rarely get the chance to do such fun things, never mind do them together. And so my flight delay from beautiful Newark, New Jersey is particularly annoying. I am most inspired by tonight's event for the following reason. This evening we are considering the words, music, and legacy of a self-made cultural icon, someone who set out to become somebody and then succeeded. More specifically, Dylan set out to become an image of something uniquely American and uniquely alternative at the same time, and he did so self-consciously and without apology. Here, we might approach the story of Dylan's life as a mythologist would. Most of our heroic narrative stories, particularly in America, involve innocent heroes whose native qualities happen to shine through despite all odds, and such qualities help them to surmount all obstacles life throws at them. But I wonder if Dylan was truly ever innocent in this way. When he was creating his own mythology early on in his career, he never referred to the pedestrian roots of Robert Zimmerman, middle-class, nice Jewish boy from Hibbing, Minnesota. He felt that he had to hide those roots and tell another, more exotic and adventurous story in order to become the authentic folk musician, the 1960s balladeer that Americans longed for in the protest movements that gripped the country. But what is so interesting is that even when these roots were revealed, Bob Dylan didn't lose his mystique, his cachet. Blowing in the Wind, Like a Rolling Stone, and so many songs stayed iconic. And so did he. Even with all the ups and downs of his career, his status as an icon didn't shatter, and that tells us a lot. His deliberately created myth still lasted and persists today. And we can draw two conclusions about this fact. The first conclusion is that he was such a brilliant myth maker, like an advertising man, that he could sense the pulse of the times and give people the authenticity they wanted, even if it wasn't authentic. The second conclusion is that even the most nondescript suburban American roots have something in them that can create a balladeer that sings to the times. It is probably a bit of both, but these days I take inspiration from the second conclusion, that a Bob Dylan is present in every Robert Allen Zimmerman we meet. And that is the unexpected creativity that America can nourish and even sustain in artists for decades beyond their early, more glamorous years. Enjoy the stories, enjoy the music, and welcome to Dylan at Duke.
So I want to make sure everyone can hear me. I'm Shalom Goldman. It's my privilege to conduct this evening. And the first thing I'd like to do is introduce the musicians. So if you'd bow or raise your hand, let us know who you are. Lisa Deaton, here. Kate Bowler. Anathea Portier-Young, who read that piece so beautifully. Richard Hayes. David Arcus, Laurie Barron, Tyler Smoot, and we could not do this without Reed Criswell, our technical support person, who guided us so well through Johnny Cash last year that we just had to do it again this year. So, say what? Joel Marcus. I am never going to hear the end of this. And Joel Marcus is my dear friend and has his office across from me, so I am fated. This must be because last year in the college newspaper there was a picture of Joel, and it said it was me. So that must be why. There's some karmic redistribution here. Thank you. So the format of this evening is that I will be saying some things about Bob Dylan. We will be watching slides, some video clips, and the music will be interspersed. And as Richard said, this will be a long evening, so please relax. Feel free to go outside if you need to. If you have the urge to dance, go over to the corner. I think you will after you hear some of the music. Now, I'm imagining everyone's here because they're some sort of Bob Dylan fan, but I want to say some general remarks about him, because it's now 50 years that Bob Dylan has been intriguing Americans. It's just 50 years. In those 50 years, he's written over 500 songs, and I want to commend to you the BobDylan.com website and the Wikipedia page on Bob Dylan songs, which lists 485 independent creations, tells you when they were written and when they were first recorded. For the past 25 years, Bob Dylan has been on what he calls his never-ending tour, in which he gives approximately 100 concerts a year. This is far beyond what anyone in his status does, and we might think about why he does this. It's something of an enigma, one of the many enigmas of Bob Dylan. I gather that he wants to. That is, he's wealthy beyond imagination, I'm sure. He's powerful, he's influential, but he wants to perform 100 times a year, and often in very small places, to 200 or 300 people. So as much as Bob Dylan says about himself, I'm not a prophet, I'm not a teacher, he seems to want to fulfill that role. He wants to be a teacher. He wants to be a mentor and a prophet. He told us many years ago, don't follow leaders. Of course, he also said, watch your parking meters, so that's not so profound, right? But his don't follow leaders became a kind of catchword. But then he presents himself as a leader. It's this tension between Dylan's need to be heard and his insistence that he's not a prophet that makes him so intriguing. Another thing that makes him so intriguing is that he creates expectations and then seems to deliberately disappoint them. So if you're my age, which is 66, and Bob Dylan is now 72, I first heard Bob Dylan in 1964, and I was thrilled like everyone else. But a decade later, I heard him, and I was bitterly disappointed. How could he do this? And then a decade later, I was thrilled again. Somehow, he has this talent to keep us being irritated, but yet drawn to him. I hope you noticed that in this Sunday's New York Times, there was an article suggesting that Bob Dylan be given the Nobel Prize. It was really a serious, interesting article. Why isn't the most vital of American artists a front-runner for the prize? Bob Dylan, a fierce and uncompromising poet whose writings 50 years on still crackle with relevance. Mr. Dylan's work remains utterly lacking in conventionality, moral sleight of hand, pablum, or sops to his audience. His lyricism is exquisite, his concerns and subjects are demonstrably timeless, and few poets of any era have seen their work bear more influence. Of course, this is not going to happen, that Dylan is going to get the Nobel Prize, but it's very encouraging to read it in the Old Gray Lady, what we used to call the New York Times, a paper that really didn't appreciate Bob Dylan for many years. Now, though I have a lifelong interest in Bob Dylan, I am not a Dylanologist. And there are such people. In fact, I'm afraid that there are people here tonight who are Dylanologists. And the first Dylanologist was a man who I met, I think unfortunately. His name is A.J. Weberman. He's a man my age in New York. And when Bob Dylan lived in Greenwich Village, he would go through Dylan's garbage and find letters and figure out what food he ate. And then he would write articles about this. And if you're really obsessed with Bob Dylan, you can find a record put out by Folkways Music of a conversation between Bob Dylan and A.J. Weberman. But this is really going off into the Talmudic sphere of Dylan's studies, right? Now, tonight, we will hear great performances of 8 of Dylan's songs by our band, and I will be playing 3 clips of Dylan and others singing his music. You will learn about Dylan's influence on American culture and how he was influenced by that culture. And we will look at Dylan respectfully, but not reverently. I hope that's clear already. And I'll be showing you some very funny parodies of Bob Dylan. They abound in the culture. Our first song will be sung by Lisa Deaton, I Shall Be Released, written in the mid-1960s and first recorded on the Basement tapes in 1967.
They say everything can be replaced. They say every distance is not near. Yet I remember every face of every man who put me here. I see my light come shining from the west unto the east. Any day now, any day now, I shall be released. They say every man needs protection. They say every man must fall. Yet I swear I see my reflection someplace so high above this wall. I see my light come shining from the west unto the east. Any day now, any day now, I shall be released. Yonder stands a man in this lonely crowd, a man who swears he's not to blame. All day long I hear him shout so loud, crying out that he was framed. I see my light come shining from the west unto the east. Any day now, any day now, I shall be released. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for reminding us what a great song that is. Reed, could I have the next slide, please? So, as Dean Hayes mentioned, last year we had an evening devoted to Johnny Cash. And this is a photo from 1969 of Cash and Bob Dylan from the late lamented Johnny Cash television show, which only played for one season. And last week, on September the 28th, was the 10th anniversary of Johnny Cash's death. And I came across a statement that Bob Dylan wrote when Johnny Cash died, and I want to read you from part of it, but I really commend the whole thing to you. You can just Google Dylan's statement on Johnny Cash. September 2003. Of course, I knew of him before he ever heard of me. It was 1955 or 1956. I Walked the Line was playing on the radio all summer, and it was different than anything else you ever heard. The record sounded like a voice from the middle of the earth. It was so powerful and moving. It was profound, and so was the tone of it. Every line deep and rich, awesome and mysterious, all at once. I Walked the Line had a monumental presence and a certain type of majesty that was humbling. Even a simple line like, I find it very, very easy to be true, can take your measure. We can remember that and see how far we fall short of it. Johnny wrote thousands of lines like that. Truly, he is what the land and country is all about. The heart and soul of it personified, and what it means to be here, and he said it all in plain English. And this mutual admiration between Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan is reflected, sadly, in very few recordings, only in one published song that Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan did together. But if you're brave enough to go into this wild world online of rare recordings, you can find that there's a whole session of them singing together, but it costs a fortune to get a hold of it. So we're going to hear a clip now of Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan, recorded in the middle of 1969. Reed, do we have that up, or? And while we're waiting for that, how do I know all this? Because I'm using the Bob Dylan Encyclopedia, which I can't recommend enough. Keys
So
to the
much
Rain.
time, you never heard it again. He'd start a song and turn it around and then stop, or somebody would say something, or somebody would make some noise or something, and that was lost, and then it was into another beat, into another song.
Is it rolling, Bob? To be alone with you, just you and me. Now won't you tell me true? Ain't that the way it ought
Bob
to be?
and Sarah and the children stayed in my house while he was doing that album. And he asked me to be guest on it. Well, as it turned out, we went in the studio and they turned on the recorders for about 2 hours.
We set up some microphones and stools, and they came in there and met each other and went out there and started playing.
Take one, Johnny Cash, Bob Dylan, 1,000 Miles Behind. Take one.
You want me to get in closer on it?
History was happening. The evolution of social structure was being changed with this guy that came in the studio playing this music. And when Cash was combined with Dylan, each of them got a bunch of shares of different audiences, and all of a sudden it was fashionable for radio to play different things.
Down the street the dogs are barking and the day is getting dark. When the night begins to fall, then a dog will lose their bark. Then a silent night will shatter from the sounds inside my mind, and I'm just one too many mornings and 1,000 miles behind.
From the crossroads of my doorstep, my eyes, they begin to fade. And I turn my head back to the room where my love and I have laid. Then I gaze back to the street, the sidewalk, and the sign. And I'm one too many mornings and 1,000 miles behind.
Well, it's a restless, hungry feeling. It don't do nobody no good. And everything I'm saying, you can say it just as good. 'Cause you're right from your side, Bob, but I'm right from mine.
I know it.
We're just one too many mornings and 1,000 miles behind. Is that right?
Down the street the dogs are barking, and the day is getting dark. As the night comes in a falling, those dogs will lose their bark. And the silent night will shatter from the sounds inside my mind. As I'm one too many mornings and 1,000 miles behind. I'm just one too many mornings and 1,000 miles behind. But just one too many mornings and 1,000 miles behind. I'm just one too many mornings and 1,000 miles behind. I'm just one too many mornings and 1,000 and 1,000 miles, another 1,000 miles. Yeah, 1,000 miles behind, 1,000 miles behind.
Made in 1969. By that time, Bob Dylan was very, very well known. But he emerged at a very young age. That's something I'd like to remind all the undergraduates who are good enough to be here tonight, that in 1963, when Bob Dylan was 22 years old, he wrote Blowing in the Wind, and it came out as a single. I remember vividly putting it on the 45 player. And later that year, it came out as an album. And to honor that point, 1963, 50 years ago, when Bob Dylan emerged into the public eye, we're going to hear our band sing Blowing in the Wind.
And how many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
How many years must a mountain exist before it is washed to the sea? How many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? Yes, and how many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful rendition, and I want to note that David Arcus's keyboard music is a way to remind us that Bob Dylan's first instrument was the piano. And this speaks to what Professor Patton was saying about his mythologizing. Well, everyone has to start with the guitar in the folk music imagination. But coming from a nice middle-class Jewish home, his mom and dad had a piano at home. And that's how we started, playing in Minnesota. And many of the songs were actually written on a piano. And I read an interview with Dylan in which he said he kind of had to hide that for a while. It reminds me of the great blues man, Muddy Waters, who I heard say on a tape that when the folk music revival started, he had to buy himself overalls because he was always performing in a suit for like 30 years in Chicago, but he had to buy overalls so he could be a folk person, right? And I'm not pointing fingers because I'm of that generation. We had to be somehow authentic, right? And authentic didn't mean wearing a suit, right? Despite Leonard Cohen, who tried to turn it all around, and now to be really cool, you have to wear a nice suit. So Bob Dylan emerges at 21, 22 in New York City, and there's so much to say about him that I want to focus on the theme of religion and American culture. And I have 4 areas that I can speak up to you about tonight. One is Dylan's Jewish childhood and youth. The other is his conversion experience of 1979, when he adopted a form of what he called born-again Christianity in California. The third is, to me, something I learned about only this year, the adoption of Bob Dylan's music by African American churches, a very powerful movement that started about a decade ago. And to loop back to the Jewish theme, Bob Dylan's very complex relationship to the state of Israel. So I'm a professor of religion and of Jewish studies. This is the stuff I know about, so I want to share it with you. Now, Bob Dylan's Jewish childhood. Well, what does that mean? He had a suburban, middle-class childhood. He had some Jewish education, but I don't want to take it too far, right? Kind of Bob Dylan as rabbi or Bob Dylan as mystic. You know, you see this. I recently picked up a newspaper I really value called The Forward from New York. You could read it on forward.com. And I saw this lead in an article. 4 Jews who changed Judaism. I didn't have to take off my glasses for that. That was large type. So I thought I would read about Spinoza, Maimonides, Heschel, and Buber. No, it was about Sandy Koufax, Lenny Bruce, Barbra Streisand, and Bob Dylan, right? That is, it's not about Judaism, it's about Jewishness, right? And sadly, this is what happens to many cultures in America. They get popularized to the extent that you need to distinguish between the religion and some culture that grows up adjacent to. I wouldn't even say around the religion. I mean, I used to teach at the unjustly famous Dartmouth College for many years, and I went there, and I remember I was maybe the only Jew on campus for about 5 years, and someone came up to me and said, "Oh, you're Professor Goldman?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "You know, I love Barbra Streisand." Right? That was like a great moment for me, you know, like, oh, thank you, you know, like, what could I say? I wanted to say, I can't stand Barbra Streisand, but I was in New England and I was trying to be polite, you know. So let's not overdo the Judaic, that is the actual religion, but it is ethnically a Jewish upbringing. And Reed, if we could have the next slide, please. Now, I noted that in 1963, when Blowing in the Wind came out, Bob Dylan was 22 years old. But let's go back to 1954, when Bob Dylan was 13 years old. And in the Jewish tradition, he had his bar mitzvah, right? The day when you putatively, allegedly enter adulthood, or you take on the responsibilities of Jewish law. And it's better to, this is actually the synagogue, Agudat Achim. How do we translate Agudat Achim? I don't know. Band of Brothers maybe might be a good way. Brotherly place. And this is a home in which Bob Dylan's bar mitzvah, at least the ritual part, was celebrated. Then there was a catering hall where 400 people attended. So that was a lot of people at a bar mitzvah. But Bob Dylan's Hebrew name is Shabtai ben Avraham, right? A very unusual name. And he was tutored for a few months by an Orthodox rabbi who came from the Twin Cities to Hibbing, Minnesota, where there was only a small Jewish community. And he was taught to read the Torah portion. Now, Bob Dylan's parents, his mother, Beatty, was the president of the local Hadassah, that's the Women's Zionist auxiliary organization, and his father, Abe, was the head of the B'nai B'rith Lodge. That's a fraternal organization. So both his parents are heavily, not religiously involved, but kind of socially involved with Judaism. And again, what Dean Patton, who's, I should say her field is myth, ancient myth and modern myth, was saying was that Bob Dylan managed to completely obscure this without denying it. Right? He didn't say, I have nothing to do with this past, but he made his own past. And very often he would speak about growing up in a carnival. You know, growing up, once he grew up in a rodeo, you know, and then when he was 13, he was roping cattle. But when he was 13, he had a bar mitzvah, you know. So which was he doing? Was he roping cattle or he had a, they are mutually exclusive, but not for the mythic imagination, right? And Actually, I admire a mind like this, right? Because it's only a mind like this that can create something so extraordinary, right? There's our base reality that we're living in, and there's the mind of the artist, which just takes you very far afield. Now, read the next slide, please. Ah, yes. So, the house that you just saw on the slide is now for sale. And the poor people who own it, by the way, it hasn't been a synagogue for like 50 years. But the owners want to sell it, and they figured out this is a way to promote it. But so far, no one has brought it. I think they thought, you know, David Geffen would buy it, or some Silicon Valley type. Okay, now we've had too much reverence for Bob Dylan. We're going to see a comedy routine about Bob Dylan called Bob Dylan's Bar Mitzvah by the great and not well known enough a comedian named Richard Belzer.
Okay, we fall down, we get up. Okay, thank you. And now, of course, you all know the Bob Dylan Bar Mitzvah tapes are now available. Imagine what Dylan's Bar Mitzvah must have sounded like. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Share kitty shiny, the melts for sub. Zoom golly, 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 zoom golly. And his voice changes, right? Lay, let it lay. Let my monster for an hour. Let me get that voice. I have a fantasy about Dylan I'd like to share with you. I feel that no matter how old Dylan gets, he'll continue to perform. This is my image, my fantasy of the 86-year-old Bob Dylan in concert, the old Dylan. Oi! 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 Once upon a time, you dressed so fine, you could have bumped a dime in your prime, didn't you? People called said you're dull, you're bound to fall, you thought they was all kidding you. You still laugh about everybody that was hanging out. Now you don't laugh so loud, Mr. Big Shot, eh? Now you don't feel so proud of having to be scrounging here next to me. How does it feel like a rolling gold stone? Thank you. I can't work unless the wires are loose down.
Okay, so when I first saw this in 1979, the idea of Bob Dylan performing when he was 86 seemed absurd. But it's only 16 years from now, so, you know, maybe the undergraduates can send me an email when I'm in the rest home, you know, like, Bob Dylan is really, once upon a time. So now that we made fun of him, I feel that we have to give Mr. Dylan a say about his own childhood. Some of you may have seen No Direction Home. Some of you see that? Can I have a few people? Oh, good. But not enough people, so I won't show it. So we're going to see 5 to 7 minutes of a documentary made by the great filmmaker Martin Scorsese, in which Dylan talks to a wisely unrecorded interviewer, so just Dylan is talking, about his childhood. And this is a great and rare opportunity because he really doesn't like to talk about where he came from.
The sound of the record made me feel like I was somebody else. You know, that I was maybe not even born to the right parents or something.
You got to accentuate the positive, mind it to negative, latch on to the affirmative, don't mess with Mr. In-Between.
It looked like any other town out of the 40s or 50s, just some rural town, was on their way to nowhere, and you probably couldn't find it on a map. Maybe 3 blocks one way and maybe 3 blocks the other way, and that was like a main street where all the department stores were, the drug stores, that's about it, you know. What happens to a town after the livelihood is gone? All right, it just sort of decays and blows away, doesn't it? That's the way it goes. Most of the land was either farmland or just completely scavenged by the mining companies. Really hot in the summertime. In the winter, it was just rightly cold. You know, just all winter it was just. We didn't have the clothes they have now, so I mean, you just wore 2 or 3 shirts at a time, slept in your clothes. The pit was on the outer limits of the town. That's where everybody worked. Or you couldn't be a rebel. It was so cold that you couldn't be bad. The weather equalizes everything very quickly. Nobody was going to really pull a stick up. There really wasn't any philosophy, any idiom, any ideology to really go against. My father and his brothers, they had an electrical store. Well, the first job I ever had was sweeping up the store, and I was supposed to learn the discipline of hard work or something, you know, and the merits of employment. Circuses came through. There were tent shows at the Kearney Midways, and they had barkers.
Got a horse with 2 heads. Got a chicken in there with a man fan. He sealed the girl boy.
It's just more rural back then. That's what people did. You could see guys in blackface, George Washington in blackface, or Napoleon wearing blackface. There's like weird Shakespearean things. It's stuff that didn't really make any sense at the time. And people had other jobs in the Kearney scene. I saw somebody putting makeup on, getting back from running the Ferris wheel once. And I thought that was pretty interesting. You know, wow, the guy's got, you know, well, he does 2 things, you know, or something like that.
I've got a song here that I'd like to do that's been awful kind to me and the boys. A tune called Cold, Cold Heart. I try so hard, my dear, to show that you're my every dream. Yet you're afraid each thing I do is just some evil scheme. A memory from your lonesome past keeps us so far apart. Why can't I free your doubtful mind and melt your cold, cold heart?
We'd have to like listen late at night for other stations to come in from other parts of the country, places that were far away. 50,000-watt stations coming out through the atmosphere.
He told me he was
Johnny Ray, he had some kind of strange incantation in his voice, like he'd been voodooed, and he cried kind of when he sang.
I have faith in all kinds of weather, for the sun will always shine.
It's Rainbow Opry time, another big folk music show starring Webb Pierce.
Fast and the glass that will settle my brain. It's my first one to take.
Working, got my mojo working, working, got my mojo working, got my mojo working, but just don't work on you.
It was the sound that got to me. It wasn't who it was, or it was the sound of it.
This is our town, Hibbing, Minnesota, USA.
When I began listening to the radio, I began to get bored of being there. I thought about going to military school, but the military school that I envisioned myself going to, we couldn't get in, which was West Point. You know, I could always envision myself dying in some heroic battle somewhere. So I mean, maybe that era that is gone.
Well, it's Saturday night and I just got paid. Fool about my money, don't
Try to say, cats all jumping around, have a time. Saturday night, honey, I'm feeling fine. Gonna rock it up, gonna rip it up, gonna shake it up, gonna ball it up. I'm gonna rip it up and rock tonight. I got me a date and I won't believe I picked up.
Listening to the radio late at night in Minnesota. And one of the things that Bob Dylan's work, these 485 plus songs, shows us is that he was able to listen to this music and somehow channel it to create songs that sounded like they were old. A few years after Blowing in the Wind came out, there were whole groups of people singing it who thought it was 100 years old. They had no idea that this kid wrote it, right? And he's continued to do that. It's really an amazing feat. Among the few songs that he recorded early that weren't his was the song Satisfied Mind. That was written by a country and western duo in the 40s, and Dylan transformed it into his own song, and we're going to hear the band play it now.
How many times have you heard someone say, if I had his money, I would do things my way? But little they know that it's so hard to find one rich man in a million with a satisfied mind. Money can't buy you your youth when you're old, or a friend when you're lonely, or love that's grown cold. The wealthiest man is a pauper at times compared to the man with a satisfied mind. Well, once I was living in fortune and fame. I had all that I needed to get a start in life's game. Then one day it happened, I lost every dime. But I'm richer by far, with a satisfied mind.
I want to thank Professor Marcus, whose name I neglected in the beginning, for that beautiful solo and for agreeing to play on his harmonica. I didn't know he would do that, so thank you very much. But by the end of the 1970s, Bob Dylan did not have a satisfied mind. Like Johnny Cash, he went down the path of too many stimulants, too many depressives, too many long nights, too many lost days, and he was looking for some sort of salvation. And he found it in the Jesus movement growing up at the end of that grew up in the end of the 1970s in California, specifically in the Vineyard Church in California. And it seems, as with everything else in Bob Dylan's life, this did not just stay an isolated period, but it became a source of creativity. So he withdrew from performing for 4 months. He studied in a Bible class every morning at the Vineyard Church. And he says during this period he read the whole Old Testament and New Testament from cover to cover with a completely new insight. And then he came back to music, and he produced 3 remarkable albums, or at least now we think of them as remarkable, between 1979 and 1981. The first of these is Slow Train Coming. Now, when these records came out, Dylan's fan base was furious, just as they had been furious when he went electric in 1965, and they screamed Judas at him in the auditoriums. That is, he creates the image of the great, authentic folk musician, then he dares to play an electric guitar. Then he's the great American hippie secularist, and then he dares to find Jesus, right? This is very upsetting for people, and understandably, it's not a good marketing campaign. Unless you're this superior creative person who really knows that the ultimate marketing campaign is to keep changing. Right? So 50 years later, people are still buying your albums. Bob Dylan put out another official bootleg. He made that up, too. Why have other people make money from your bootlegs, right? His 10th in the bootleg series came out last week. It's doing amazingly well, right? So during this period, he wrote about 30 songs which have become popular in certain churches, but most often in African American churches. And many of the fans who hated these songs and are still around 20, 25 years later have now come around to them. You know why? Well, they performed in the black churches. They must be authentic, right? I hate to be cynical, but that's the way it is, right? Oh, these are real church songs. So now we can say that Bob Dylan, the great genius, wrote them, right? But before this, we thought he was just another nut, right? So how he does this, I don't know. But he does it, and I hope I'm around and we're around for the next, in 10 years we'll do another Bob Dylan review. I don't know what he'll be up to. But more importantly, to the music itself. So now we're going to hear Slow Train Coming. And while our musicians are getting ready, I just want to say one thing about this album cover. Sadly, no one buys albums anymore. But for those of us graying people who still own them and buy them, this is unusual because this is his only album with no notes. All you get when you buy this album is the picture on the cover and the names of the songs on the back. No notes, nothing. Dylan is a graphomaniac. He loves to write all the time. But the songs are supposed to speak for themselves.
low down and disgusted. I can't help but wonder what's happening to my companions. Are they lost or are they found? Have they counted the cost it'll take to bring down all those earthly principles they're gonna have to abandon? There's a slow train coming up around the bend. Well, I had a woman down in Alabama. She was a backwoods girl, but she sure was realistic. She says, boy, without a doubt, you gotta quit your mess and straighten out. You could die down here, be just another accident statistic. There's a slow train coming up around the bend. All that foreign oil controlling American soil. Look around you now, it's bound to make you embarrassed. Sheiks walking around like kings, wearing fancy jewels and nose rings, deciding America's future of Amsterdam and of Paris. Oh, there's a slow train coming up around the bend. Ego is inflated, his laws are outdated. They don't apply no more, you can't rely no more to be standing around and waiting. In the home of the brave, Jefferson turning over in his grave. Fools glorifying themselves, trying to manipulate Satan. And there's a slow train coming up around the bend. Big time negotiators, false healers, woman haters, masters of the blood and masters of the proposition. But the enemy I see wears a cloak of decency. All non-believers and men stealers, talking in the name of religion. And there's a slow train coming up around the bend. People starving and thirsting, grain elevators are bursting. Oh, you know it costs more to store the food than it costs to give it. They say lose your inhibitions, follow your own ambitions. They talk about a life of brotherly love, but show me someone who knows how to live it. Oh, there's a slow train coming. It's up around the bend. Well, my baby went to Illinois with some bad-talking boys she could destroy. A real suicide case. There was nothing I could do to stop it. I don't care about economy. I don't care about astronomy. But it sure does bother me to see my loved ones turning into puppets. And there's a slow train coming up around the bend. Yeah, there's a slow train coming up around the
So, though Bob Dylan didn't write anything on these records, he did something very unusual. He gave sermons at the concerts where he sang these songs. And I want to read you the introduction to this song. I thought we'd hear the song first. This is what Bob Dylan said on the stage, November of 1979, to an essentially hostile audience, because people bought tickets to a Bob Dylan concert in California, and then there's all this Christian music. You know, we read every day what a horrible situation this world is in. Now God chooses to do these things in this world to confound the wise. Anyway, we know this world's going to be destroyed. We know that Christ will set up his kingdom in Jerusalem for 1,000 years, when the lion will lie down with the lamb. Have you heard that before? Have you heard that before? I'm just curious to know, how many people believe that here? Don't answer me. But according to the notes here, people started to cheer. The hostile audience, I guess, was turned around. All right, this is Slow Train Coming. It's been coming for a long time, and it's picking up speed. That's the image of this album. And notice the pickaxe and the cross there on the left. So the thing that's, very hard to put together is you produce a new kind of music. Again, people are hostile to you. And instead of retreating, you go out there and are even more assertive about it. The same thing happened with the electric music. He said, okay, this bothers you. Wait till you hear this. This is really going to bother you, right? Not everybody can get away with that, right? Some people can. Reed, can I have the next slide, please? Now, when Dylan wanted to make this first Christian record, Slow Train Coming, he wanted to get the best musicians and producers possible. And, well, everyone wanted to work with Bob Dylan, but when people got to the studio and they looked at the music and the words, they got a little nervous. So I heard an interview, that's the young Mark Knopfler, the guitarist from Dire Straits, who said, I thought, well, this is the best thing that could ever happen to me, to be Bob Dylan's guitarist and to arrange the music. And then I get there and, what am I as a secular Jew supposed to do with this message? And he said, well, I overcame any reluctance that I had, and I made it. And what happened was that this record and this song won a Grammy as the best performance in 1979. And the producer, Jerry Wexler, who was a declared atheist, said he too was reluctant to produce this record. But when you listen to the record, it's so beautifully done, and the songs are so powerful that even if you're a declared atheist, it somehow overcomes your aversions. Next slide, please. Now, Dylan, as the 1979, he made that, and in 1980 he made a record called Saved, even more explicit in its commitment to Christianity. with lots of notes. In case you didn't get the point, on the back he's preaching to you and he's publishing the words. Again, some people were drawn in, some people were repelled. And the next, please. And then a final one in this series, Shot of Love, where he seems to be drawing back a little from this purely Jesus-centered music to going back into the American mainstream. Now, Dylan, a year or two later, seemed to drop the Christian preaching. Of course, we don't know what his personal beliefs were. He never really speaks about that. But he dropped the overtly Christian persona, and he went back to writing different kinds of music, and he also returned to his old music. But to the consternation of his fans, he returned to the old music in a new form. So he would sing Blowing in the Wind, but it would sound like something else, right? He would sing Visions of Johanna, but like as a country and western song. And this really disconcerted a lot of people, but again, it increased his appeal in a strange way. Now, one of the most lasting songs from this period is Gotta Serve Somebody, the title we gave to this evening. And I think of all the songs he wrote, this irritated his fellow musicians the most. Because it's one thing to preach from the bully pulpit of the stage, but it's another thing to say you have to serve God. And if this is too reverent for you, when you go home you can Google John Lennon, Serve Yourself, where the former Beatle does a parody of this song, but I couldn't play it here because it's really vicious and obscene. But it is very funny. Maybe perhaps it's for a different evening and not to be held in the chapel. So let us hear, actually, Reed, could we go back one slide? Thank you. And we're going to hear our wonderful band play Gotta Serve Somebody.
He definitely includes every person in this song. Each of you in the audience will be found somewhere in this song. You may be an ambassador to England or to France. You may like to gamble. You might like to dance. You may be the heavyweight champion of the world. You may be a socialite with a long string of pearls, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. Yeah, you are. You're gonna have to serve somebody. It may be the devil. It may be the Lord, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. Might be a rock and roll addict, prancing on the stage. Might have drugs at your command and have women in a cage. You may be a businessman or some high-degree thief. They may call you doctor, they may call you chief, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. Yeah, you're gonna have to serve somebody. It may be the devil, it may be the Lord, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. You may country under another name, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. Yes, you are. You're gonna have to serve somebody. It may be the devil, it may be the Lord, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. Well, you may be a construction worker, working on a home. You may live in a mansion, you might live in a dome. You might own guns and you might even own some tanks. You might be somebody's landlord, you might even own some banks, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. Yeah, you are gonna have to serve somebody. Well, now it may be the devil, it may be the Lord, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. Serve somebody, boys. You may be a preacher for your spiritual pride. You might be a city councilman taking bribes on the side. You might work in a barber shop. You might know how to cut some hair. Well, you might be somebody's mistress. You might be somebody's heir, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. Yes, you are gonna have to serve somebody. It may be the devil, it may be the Lord, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. You might like to wear cotton, you might like to wear silk. You might like to drink whiskey, and you might like to drink milk. You might like to eat caviar, you might like to eat bread. You might be sleeping on the floor, you might be sleeping in a king-size bed, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. Yeah, you're gonna have to serve somebody. It may be the devil, it may be the Lord, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. You may call me Terry, you may call me Jimmy, you may call me Bobby, and you may call me Zimmy, you may call me RJ, and you may call me Ray, you may call me anything, but no matter what you say, you're gonna have to serve somebody. Gonna have to serve somebody. Well, it may be the devil, it may be the Lord, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. Well, I said that it may be the devil,
Thank you. That was really magnificent. So we spoke about Dylan's childhood. We spoke about his Christian period. And now I want to move briefly to his fascination with Israel and his very complex relationship to that place. So, Reed, if I could have that neighborhood bully slide. So after this intense Christian period, Dylan traveled to Israel, and again, privately, but kind of leaving hints, he got involved with Jewish religious causes and with the state of Israel. And he wrote a song that he never performs called Neighborhood Bully, and it's not one of those covered songs like I Shall Be Released that we started with. But Neighborhood Bully begins this way. Well, the neighborhood bully, he's just one man. His enemies say he's on their land. They got him outnumbered about 1,000,000 to 1. He's got no place to escape to, no place to run. He's the neighborhood bully. That is saying that people say that Israel is the neighborhood bully, but I say that he's anything, or Israel is anything but a neighborhood bully. You can Google this, and I don't think you'll find any performances, but you will find the words. And it's pretty difficult to read it any other way than a very celebratory song about Israel, which is very unusual for Bob Dylan to make this kind of political statement. Now, in typical Dylan fashion, when he's interviewed about this, he always says, oh, that's not about Israel. I don't know what else it could conceivably be about. But again, that's Dylan's charm, and even more than any American politician, he just has complete deniability. So I mention this to you as part of the complex story of Dylan's own Jewish identification. Not denying his Jewishness, but never talking about it in public. And except for this rare occasion in which he wrote a song about Israel, not really speaking much about Israel, although he does go to Israel. Can I have the next slide, please? Yes. So, those of you who are old enough may remember that on one of Bob Dylan's early records, he has this very funny bit saying, I was out west, and I heard this old cowboy song, Hava, Nagila, and he sings a few bars. That was in 1965 or something. Then, no, we have to explain this. Bob Dylan got attached, as many celebrities do, to Chabad. That is the Lubavitcher Hasidim, the sort of neo-ultra-Orthodox group that promotes, one could think of them as missionaries to other Jews. That is, a group that tries to bring Jews closer to their idea of what Jewish religious observance is. And one could see why Dylan would be attracted to this. And it's a group that attracts celebrities, Jewish and non-Jewish. You may know that Madonna was also interested in Chabad, but as she's not Jewish, she can't really join them. She belongs to another Kabbalistic group, the Kabbalah Center. And I recommend to you my article about Madonna. Just Google my name and Madonna and Kabbalism. You'll read all about her. But she does wear one of those red strings that cost a fortune and that are blessed and that will bring you into alignment with your true nature. So the Chabad, like many charitable and religious organizations, has a telethon in California. This is an appearance of Bob Dylan, Harry Dean Stanton, another singer and actor, and Bob Dylan's son-in-law, Peter Himmelman, who's an Orthodox Jew, appearing with this rabbi. And then I'll say something about it after we see it. Read, please.
God bless you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. God should give you long, healthy, and happy years to do mitzvahs like this. And enjoy your wonderful son-in-law. God bless you with a lot of excitement and good. And Harry Dean, we can get you to be a chazan in the shul, maybe. God bless you. Wonderful.
Maybe you could tell we're having some trouble with the words. It's a song, Hava Nagila. And then they got the...
Maybe everybody could sing along.
Nagila blame nismecha. I don't know what is it. What's the word?
Venismecha.
Venismecha.
Yes.
Venismecha. What exactly does it mean?
Let's be happy because God is good to all His children throughout the entire world.
It's not a bad reason. Let's see how we're going to start this. Maybe you want to do a little dance in front of us because this is kind of got a rough edge on it. There it is. There it is. Hamba, Nakila, Hamba, Nakila, Hamba, Nakila, Venismacha. Hamba, Nakila, Hamba, Nakila, Hamba, Nakila, Venismacha. Hamba, Neranina, Hamba, Neranina, Hamba, Neranina, Venismacha. Hamba, Neranina, Hamba, Neranina, Hamba, Neranina, Venismacha. Okay, a little faster, I think. Hamba, Nakila, Hamba, Nakila, Hamba, Nakila, Venismacha. Hamba, Nakila, Hamba, Nakila, Hamba, Nakila, Venismacha. Hamba, Neranina, Hamba, Neranina, Hamba, Neranina, Venismacha. Hamba, Neranina, Hamba, Neranina, Hamba, Neranina.
You get the idea. It goes on for a while. It doesn't really change. But let me tell you what's very curious about this. It's a little artifact of American Jewish life. That in the beginning they say, Rabbi, what does this song mean? And he says, oh, God is with us. This song has nothing, not only has nothing to do with God, it's a secular Israeli song. It's like a campfire song. God is the farthest thing from this song. But somehow this Hebrew gets incorporated into American Jewish folklore, and Bob Dylan, wearing a yarmulke, he didn't sing along, can play the harmonica. Now, can I have the next slide, please? With this kind of Jewish, next one. This one. So with this turn to Judaism, Bob Dylan takes his son, Jacob, who's now about 16 or 17. He hadn't had a bar mitzvah yet. And he takes him to Jerusalem to have a bar mitzvah. And this is a picture of Dylan at the Western Wall, praying at that bar mitzvah, wearing phylacteries, tefillin, and talit, a prayer shawl. And actually, I'm here speaking about Dylan tonight because he was in Jerusalem, and of course he was staying at the best hotel, the American Colony, with his son. And I could never afford to stay at the American Colony, but like many professors, I like to go there and have coffee on Saturday afternoon, which I did in 1983 or so. And I walked in and thinking, okay, do I have $10 for coffee? I said yes. And there was Bob Dylan and it's obviously his son sitting having lunch. So I said to myself in Yiddish, Pisher, like, hey, are you going to go talk to him? And I did. And I spoke to him for maybe 3 minutes. He was incredibly cordial and not what his reputation would have. And I said, are you here for your son's bar mitzvah? And he said, yes, we're really thrilled to be here, and I love coming to Jerusalem. So that started me thinking, well, maybe there is something about this Bob Dylan tied, after his Christian period to Judaism and to Jerusalem. Of course, you could come to Jerusalem as a good Christian or a good Muslim, right? You could come to Jerusalem for many reasons. But it's clear from that photograph and from coming from his son's bar mitzvah that he was there for a Jewish reason. I heard that Bob Dylan does not like this photograph circulated, but I don't really care. Okay. Because we don't want to be too reverent. So now, this was in 1983. Since then, there have been sightings. This often happens with celebrities. X was seen at Y place, and I privileged to spend a month or two in Israel every year, and someone will say to me, "Oh, did you know Dylan was at the Western Wall?" Or it's like Elvis is in the house, right? Like that kind of thing. But it is true that Bob Dylan performs in Israel every few years, starting in the 1990s, most recently last year in 2012, and then the year before in 2011. He performs at the very large stadium in the Yarkon Park. Tickets sell out immediately, and he's immensely popular there, although people are critical of him. What else is new? Israel, people are often critical. It's a very democratic, open society. People are deeply critical of him, but somehow they grab these $200 tickets and they go. But they're not as enthusiastic as they are about Barbra Streisand. I was there in June. That was $400 a ticket. I did not go, but people were like genuflecting, as much as Jews will genuflect to Barbra Streisand. Okay, so let's move away from Dylan and Judaism and Dylan and Israel back to the Dylan who, after these Christian and Jewish periods, kept going back to his old songs. And of course, many other great singers kept going back to his songs. And one of them was Bruce Springsteen, who has spoken often about being inspired by Bob Dylan. And Bruce Springsteen sang beautifully at the 30th anniversary celebration of Bob Dylan's first recordings, which would be 20 years ago. And now we're going to hear Lisa and the band with Joel Marcus leading, Bruce Springsteen's arrangement of Bob Dylan's Chimes of Freedom.
By the way, Shalom didn't really tell you who all these people are, but just so you'll know, Professor Marcus, Professor of New Testament, Professor Kate Bowler, Professor of American Christianity, Professor Anathea Portier-Young, Professor of Old Testament Hebrew Bible. Tyler Smoot is a student in the Divinity School. And Lori Barron, our drummer, is a doctoral student in New Testament and teaches New Testament Greek. And David Arcus, of course, is Associate Adjunct Professor of Church Music and one of the organists in Duke Chapel. So this is our band. I just thought you should know who these people are.
Far between sundown's finish and midnight's broken toll, we ducked inside the doorway, thunder crashing, as majestic bells of bolts struck shadows in the sound, seeming to be the chimes of freedom flashing, flashing for the warriors whose strength is not to fight, flashing for the refugees on the unarmed road of flight, and for each and every underdog soldier in the night. And we gazed upon the chimes of freedom flashing. In the city's melted furnace, unexpectedly we watched, with faces hidden while the walls were tightening, as the echo of the wedding bells before the blowing rain dissolved into the
as we listen one last time and watch with one last look, spellbound and swallowed till the tolling ended. Yeah, tolling for the aching ones whose wounds cannot be nursed, for the countless confused, accused, misused, strung out ones and worse, and for every hung out person in the whole wide universe, there we gaze upon the times of freedom flashing.
Joel, you want to? We're going to do that 5 minutes of talking, and then when the ship comes in. Okay. Okay. So, moving toward our own time, I mentioned that in the last 25 years, Bob Dylan has been on a never-ending tour, giving 100 performances a year. And at these performances, he often returns to songs from the 1960s. Those are the songs that made him famous and seem to have a special place in his heart. But then he'll sing something that he wrote just a year or two ago, and you do know that he's been producing a very creative set of records in the last 5 years or so. One of the songs that he likes to return to is When the Ship Comes In. This first came out in 1964. He recorded it between 64 and 67 3 times with different configurations of musicians. And he, again, in a rare interview, he gives a lot of interviews, but he seldom says anything of substance. But in a rare interview in which he was of substance, he said that he wrote this song in one evening after a particularly, what he felt was a very embarrassing incident in which he was traveling with his then companion, Joan Baez. Joan Baez is a faculty child of a very eminent anthropologist. And she was very well brought up and very well mannered, and despite her folk music incursion into the world of folk music, she was really a kind of aristocrat. So she was traveling with him, and she took him to a very good hotel to stay while they were going to sing somewhere. And he wasn't used to going to nice hotels. Maybe he was, but he didn't want to admit it. And he looked very scruffy, as you know, men tended to do in the 1960s. So they refused to admit them as a couple to the hotel. And Bob Dylan must have thought this was a crime on the order of Stalin's purges or something. He got so upset that he wrote Chimes of Freedom. He says, in a different hotel, he said, let's go to a motel. I can understand this. She was probably very upset, but they went to a motel, and he wrote this song. He stayed up all night and wrote this song. And I want to read to you what he said many years later in 1991 about the words to this song. You know, these words come from hanging out at a lot of poetry gatherings and reading a lot of poetry. The images are really old and romantic. They're very gothic, but yet romantic at the same time. And they have a sweetness to them also. So it's a combination of a lot of different elements at the time. That's not sitting down and writing a song. Those kinds of songs, they just come out. They're in you, so they've got to come out. He often says this, that the songs come to him. Now again, is this his myth-making, as we heard from Professor Patton's message in the beginning? Or is this some expression of his creativity, or it seems to be both. It also seems to be a form of channeling. That is, he can listen to all this poetry, listen to all this music, and then turn it into something else. And before I forget, if you're inspired to learn more about Bob Dylan, the best way is to read Bob Dylan's own book, Chronicles. And I seldom say that about an artist. Don't read their own book, because they're not going to really tell you much. But he tells you a lot about creativity, and especially about the 3 years, 20 to 23 years old, when he sunk himself in reading, listening to music, going to movies, and absorbing all the Americana that he could. So against this background, I'd like you to listen to the wonderful words and music, When the Ship Comes In, sung by Lisa and the band.
This is sort of a Peter, Paul, and Mary version of the Bob Dylan song.
Hold on a second, my Roger.
Got it? Okay.
Oh, the time will come up when the winds will stop and the breeze will cease to be a breathing. Like the stillness in the wind before the hurricane begins, the hour when the ship comes in. And the seas will split and the ship will hit and the sands on the shoreline will be shaken. And the tide will sound and the waves will pound and the morning will be breaking. Oh, the fishes will laugh as they swim out of the path, and the seagulls will be a-smiling, and the rocks on the sand will proudly stand the hour that the ship comes in. And the words that are used for to get the ship confused will not be understood as they're spoken. For the chains of the sea will have busted in the night and be buried at the bottom of the ocean. Oh, a song will lift as the mainsail shifts and the boats drift onto the shoreline. And the sun will respect every face on the deck the hour that the ship comes in. And the sands will roll out a carpet of gold for your weary toes to be a-touching. And the ship's wise men will remind you once again that the whole wide world is watching. Oh, the foes will rise with the sleep still in their eyes, and they'll jerk from their beds and think they're dreaming. But they'll pinch themselves and squeal, and they'll know that it's for real, the hour when the ship comes in. And they'll raise their hands, say, we'll meet all your demands, and we'll shout from the bow, your days are numbered. And like Pharaoh's tribe, they'll be drowned in the tide. Like Goliath, they'll be a
So Bob Dylan did return to this song and others, but it didn't sound anywhere as good as this did. And that's something that irritates people, and I want our last slide to be about that. Reed, if I could have that last slide. I said I was finished with the subject of Bob Dylan in Israel, but being that I can't keep away from the subject, and especially as I see I have Israeli colleagues in the audience, I want to return us to the question of creating expectations and disappointing them. So Bob Dylan was a great hero in Israel among music fans until he started to perform there. And once he started to perform there, people said, well, where's the Bob Dylan of those records that we listened to on those scratchy records? He's not singing the way we're used to them singing, and we can't even recognize what the songs are. So this is an article from Yediot, the big, largest circulation weekly. Dylan 2011, those were the days. That is, there were times then, back then. And if you read the article, the journalist is interviewing people who came out of the concert saying, very disappointing. Very, very bad, right? I mean, they stayed, they paid, and they probably told their friends that they went, but it wasn't what they expected. And I think this isn't only true in Israel, I think it's true everywhere. And it even makes us wonder more about Bob Dylan's never-ending tour of 100 concerts a year. I don't think these 100 concerts are a triumph, right? Many of them are a challenge. And it's pretty remarkable that a 72-year-old man wants this challenge. It's remarkable, it's admirable, and even though I've been poking fun and Richard Belzer poked the most fun with his old man Dylan, I think we can expect more of this. Dylan was very sick, but wasn't heart disease, with some heart condition a few years ago. Histoplasmosis. But I have a feeling he's going to be with us for a long time. I hope so. And speaking for myself and the musicians, we'd like to send you off tonight with a rendition of one of Dylan's great songs, Forever Young, which again seems like a song that's always been with us, and we'll hear it again in a very beautiful rendition.
May God bless and keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and let others do for you. May you build a ladder to the stars and climb on every rung, and may you stay forever young. Forever young. Forever young. May you stay forever young. May you grow up to be righteous. May you grow up to be true. May you always know the truth and see the light surrounding you. May you always be courageous, stand upright and be strong, and may you stay
Thank you. Thank you very much. And please make sure you listen to the radio and stay in touch with us when we announce who we're honoring next year. We will be here in the fall of next year with another concert. And thank you all. It was great. Thank you.